Hey vinyl community, it's Mazzy here, and I was inspired today. I'm home this week, it's Thanksgiving week. I'm always home, it seems like. But I'm not working as much this week, mainly because all my kind of clients take off Thanksgiving week in the advertising and photography commercial world. Anyway, as you know, I don't need an excuse to make a video, but I was inspired by a VC member here, a VC member that is fairly new to me, although I've been a subscriber for maybe a couple months, but doesn't have a lot of videos yet, not a lot of subscribers. So I urge you to subscribe if you like roots music, country, bluegrass. His name is Elliot Cruz, and I think he's from one of the Carolinas, North Carolina maybe. And he did a video this morning on flat picking guitar players. And I realized I've been doing all these kind of wild, wacky videos, aside from my whack-a-mole stuff, but rock and roll and artsy, Beatle crap and British stuff and jazzy. Let's get to the roots of American music and to bluegrass. And I'm going to tell you a brief story because it's important here. But thanks, Elliot, for inspiring me to make this video. And I really just pulled a bunch of CDs and records I have, and I'm going to showcase them. I probably don't know as much about the details as you, but as I said before, when I worked in the record business in the 70s, when I was 19, I got hired by someone who became a good friend, and it's my friend who I still have this need, and I just haven't been able to do it, to post like a eulogy video on my friend Vernon. And Vernon hired me at the Record Factory store in San Francisco when I was 19 years old. And he was originally from West Virginia, moved to Virginia, but turned me on to roots, bluegrass, like the real stuff. I had been into the Byrds and I got into the country rock thing, and there are a few other artists I got into that and into country and bluegrass because of other things. Of course, a lot of people from my generation got into bluegrass, not really, but peripherally because of the Beverly Hillbillies and Bonnie and Clyde with Flatt Scruggs. So I'm going to showcase my records, and again, I didn't have time to really plan this out, so they're not in any order. There are some crossover artists, but they're acoustic-based artists, and I'm going to start out with that, unless I'm wrong, and probably Elliot can educate me and a lot of us here, but is Bill Monroe. And Bill Monroe, isn't he considered the sort of the father of bluegrass? Unless I'm getting that wrong. But this is a CD box set that came out. This is from 1936 to 1994, and it's 4 CDs, and it's a perfect overview on his music. In terms of vinyl, I have several of his albums. Doc Watson, Home Again. Doc Watson, Southbound. And on Vanguard, The Essential Doc Watson. I don't have any of his later recordings, so I only really have the Vanguard, some of his Vanguard records. He was a blind musician who was excellent flat picking guitar. I did see him once in the mid 70s, and this is a great box set that I think I showcased briefly. And this came out from a Bear Sonic Journal, Bear being the audio guru who created the sound system for the Grateful Dead, and also the creator, inventor, or manufacturer, depending how you want to delicately put it, of the famous acid LSD from the period. Amazing, great sound engineer and great trippy LSD acid guru. But there's all these series of Bear Sonic Journals that he recorded from these shows of the Grateful Dead, the New Riders. This is at the boarding house in San Francisco, and where Doc and Merle played a week. I went to one of the shows, and it's a wonderful live recording, really great sound, the entire show. I think there's a vinyl condensed version that has either 1 or 2 shows, but I think for my sake, this is all I need. I do want to showcase this record because this to me is an essential record. It's Norman Blake, Tut Taylor, Sam Bush, Robbins, Vassar Clements, Dave Holland, and Jethro Burns. And it's on Flying Fish Records, came out in 1974. And I would say anyone who wants to test out their stereo system, speaker position, this is one of the greatest records, audio-wise, to test out your stereo. Not just for good sound, but it's great music, great acoustic bass, kind of folky, jazzy. So it's not strictly bluegrass, more of a hybrid. But some of these that I'm going to show you here are important or that do crossover. Excuse me, I'm like tripping over my lips, as Mazzy says. But really great record. Here we go. Okay. I'm over. I already screwed up already. I went back and forth from Bill Monroe to Doc Watson, now back to Bill Monroe. In terms of vinyl, the only Bill Monroe album I have is Bill Monroe's Bluegrass Boys, my old country favorites, all-time country favorites. I don't have the dates on this. It's on Decca Records, but great cover, just any of this stuff is great. And again, Elliot, go to his, I'll do a link below, go to his channel, and he's probably going to get into it more in detail, but it just inspired me again to play this music again, because it's so wonderful. And again, my friend Vernon turned me on to this kind of stuff. He played it in the stores, so I picked these records up, a lot of them, back in record store days. Bill Monroe and his Bluegrass Boys, 16 country greats, all-time greats, on Columbia Records. You know, it's interesting how all of us city boys, I consider myself a city boy, get turned on to this stuff through third parties. I would say a lot of people in my generation and come from the city got turned on to a lot of this stuff because of the Grateful Dead, because of Jerry Garcia. I did see Olden in the Way several times back in the 70s. It was one of the offshoot projects Jerry did. He did several offshoot things. He was always playing. He played with Merle Sanders and kind of a bluesy, jazzy thing. He played bluegrass with David Grisman. This is David Grisman, Peter Rowan, John Kahn, and Vassar Clements, the great violin player. I don't have any Vassar albums anymore. I went through a period where I traded some of my records, and unfortunately some of that acoustic bass stuff I did trade in. I do have on CD, but I pulled some of them out. David Grisman, you probably know, the David Grisman Quintet. And this is a great record. It's the only one I have left of his on vinyl, which is a shame. So now Elliot has inspired me to keep an eye open for this stuff, to re-buy it, pick it up again. David Grisman, Tony Rice, flat picking guitar, who Elliot just mentioned and showcased and talked more about him than I know about him. Daryl Anger, again, on wonderful violin player, Todd Phillips and Bill Amanique. I don't even know who that is. Sorry. But Grisman is really good on this stuff. And obviously, Jerry Garcia and David Grisman did a lot of music together. Again, a crossover artist. So again, I'm going back and forth and all around, is someone contemporary who's doing some amazing stuff and has probably some of the best sounding records you can get, is Dave Rawlings. Dave Rawlings, you may or may not know, is a guitar player, partner who plays with, I was going to say Joanna Newsom, who plays with Gillian Welch. Sorry, I blanked out there. Their own label issues these amazing sounding acoustic albums. Gillian Welch albums are beautiful pressings, great analog cut, really well mastered. But these, David Rawlings is a great guitar player, more moody, easy going to a point, but I suggest these for a newer audience if they don't want to go strictly into the bluegrass. And another crossover artist who crossed over in a way from bluegrass to country to pop was John Hartford. Early RCA record on John Hartford, Earthwords and Music, and of course the ultimate hybrid record, which probably doesn't belong in this category in this video today, but I love it anyway, is Aerial Plane, John Hartford. And what was a big hit that he wrote for that became a huge hit for Glenn Campbell. I'm blanking out, but someone else is going to write it. Another great album from the 70s, really wonderfully recorded, really great sound, is Mike Aldridge, Dobro. It's just called Dobro. It's on Tacoma Devi Records. Tacoma was the record label started by John Fahey. But this is a beautiful sounding record. I don't know what else to say about it, but this is one of those records, again, my buddy, friend, cohort, music record store, cohort, boss, whatever you want to call them, friends for many, many years, turned me on to this, and we would play this in the store. This wasn't a huge hit or anything, but it was a constant catalog item that every time we'd play this, I swear, every time we'd play this in the store, someone would ask what it is, so we'd only play it when we had copies in stock, and we had to continue. We'd just barely get 5 copies here, 5 copies there, and we'd probably sell them out every week just by playing the record. That's a lot for this kind of indie record at one store in one city for that type of thing. You know, I've talked about the Byrds ad nauseum on this site, and I've mentioned Clarence White. Clarence White with the Kentucky Colonels. Clarence White and the Kentucky Colonels were in an episode of the Andy Griffith Show playing, so you can Google that look it up on YouTube. But Clarence White, a great, amazing guitar player, did before he joined the later part of the Byrds from Sweetheart. He was on Sweetheart, but he wasn't in the Byrds until a couple albums after that. But this is Clarence White, Doug Dillard on banjo, Roland White, that's his brother, Scott Stoneman, and Tut Taylor on dobro. So a lot of these artists were crossing over. You know, Kentucky was the place, Kentucky and the Appalachians, and you know, I don't know that stuff. So any of you from my southern friends, please share more of this stuff, because I love it, and I know enough to get me in trouble. But I own a lot of it. But if there's any specific things that you see that I don't have here that I need to get, I'm totally open to it. But you know, you get in moods and you shift. So, but I love the Kentucky Colonels. These are almost the same records, overlap a little bit. This is an import of this album. I believe it's exactly the same. I could be wrong. I think it is exactly the same. World Pacific Records in the United States. This came out, the Kentucky Colonels, formerly the Country Boys. But this is an amazing record or CD. If you're into bluegrass, you're into that kind of guitar work and banjo play, you need to get this record, because it's probably one of the best of the period. This is an import United artist, a British pressing of it. I mean, either one would be great to get. So I see these occasionally around. I see this one more than this one. But those of you into country music, roots music, or bluegrass, amazing record. And this was a later pressing. It's a little different. Obviously, it's from Rounder Records. And again, the Kentucky Colonels. And 65 to 66, featuring Roland and Clarence White. That brings us back again, overlapping to the Dillards. The Dillards, bluegrass combo with Rodney Dillard, Herb Pedersen, who played on a lot of country rock records throughout the 70s. Buddy Emmons, a pedal steel player, great pedal steel player. Mitch Jane on bass, Joe Osborne on electric bass, and Toxie French and Jimmy Gordon on drums. I assume that's the Jim Gordon, who's spending time in prison now. But played with Derek and the Dominoes and Eric Clapton and Delaney and Bonnie and one of the great session drummers. But going into the personal situations, the Dillards, and you probably know, again, I'm repeating it again, Dillard teamed up with Gene Clark after the Byrds and made a couple of great albums, Dillard under the name Dillard and Clark. I'm not going to show those because they don't pertain, but these are a little more country bluegrassy. And of course, as I said before, I'm going to end up with that. Before I do that, I'll just show you several CDs, crossover artists. Obviously, Alison Krauss and Union Station. She did that great album with Robert Plant, the crossover album. But, you know, not strictly bluegrass, but bluegrass flavor. And I don't have it here on vinyl. I do have the CD of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Another interesting movie record combo that got the city people like me and the masses into bluegrass and roots music like that. And obviously a lot of great people on it. But Alison Krauss is all over that record in different forms. So it's a combo collection. A few other artists, great guitar dobroist player, flat steel is Jerry Douglas. This is a great album. Anything by Jerry Douglas would be great. Vassar Clements, as I mentioned before, it's the only CD I have of his. The Stanley Brothers. Ralph Stanley is the one who sings Oh Death. Is it Oh Death? Is that the song in Oh Brother? That's his voice. Oh Death. Great, great song. This is Stanley Brothers. Oh, you know who? Oh, I know who I forgot. One moment, please. Hold on, because they're important. That was almost like a whack-a-mole, wasn't it? But it wasn't. The Louvin Brothers. You get, now this is, okay, this is different. This is, oh yeah, this is an interesting Light in the Attic collection. Different artists picking their favorite Louvin Brothers song. So it's people like Graham Nash, Beck, Emmylou Harris, Will Oldham, Lucinda Williams, Chris Iverson, Devanda Banhart, Chris Hillman, Zooey Deschanel, the Black Angels, Dolly Parton, M. Ward. They're picking their favorite tracks. They're not covering them. They're just choosing the favorite tracks to play in the Louvin Brothers. Another Light in the Attic collection. Satan is Real. Great record. So if you like this kind of stuff, if you can still find this, I believe this one's still in print, and this is on Light in the Attic. There's one album of theirs that I can't find. Then on Rebel Records from 1986, Best of the Early Louvin Brothers I have. And of course, not of course, but a Rounder record collection of Louvin Brothers. So that brings us to, you know, when I mentioned the Stanley Brothers, Ralph Stanley, packaged obviously called A Man of Constant Sorrow, kind of cashing in on the Oh Brother, Where Art Thou theme that was really big for a while. But so what, right? You know, he kind of started that. He was a pioneer in that, so he should. I think people jumped on all over this kind of stuff. There was that period of time. Another Ralph Stanley, the very best of Ralph Stanley. And then a later album, I think T-Bone Burnett co-produced this, I believe. I could be wrong. Yeah, well, executive producer T-Bone, so he probably did. Ralph Stanley, later years, obviously. I was going to say before he died, but of course it's before he died. But I think he lived in his 90s, but still singing and playing. And I'm going to cash out, end up with, just because they became popular to the masses for a lot of reasons, and that's Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs. Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, again, my generation, Beverly Hillbillies, Bonnie and Clyde, and then later, it wasn't really them, but who did Dueling Banjos? But you remember, for Deliverance? But great records. This stuff is just killer stuff. This is a promo copy, anyway. The Ballad of Jed Clampett. The Fabulous Sound of, recorded live at Vanderbilt University. Look at that beautiful illustration on the cover. Carnegie Hall. Take the country boys out of the country and stick them in the city, and audiences go bananas. They love this stuff. They just didn't know what to make of it at first or what it was about. But especially college, a lot of college age students would get hip to this stuff initially, and then the city slickers would get into it. But it is great. And then Flatt Scruggs, One Last Time, Final Fling, just for kicks. And then again, if you want a great overview, this is a great Columbia overview. Columbia did great packages of this kind of stuff. And this kind of covers all the bases. Foggy Mountain Breakdown. That's the became sort of this hit because of Bonnie and Clyde. Anyway, that's sort of a response video to Elliot Cruz. Anybody else that is into country, bluegrass, acoustic-y sourced records, I would suggest jumping on. Maybe they can make this a thread or something. But again, this is the one to pick up. Write this down. If you see it, grab it, and you'll adjust your speakers. Move your speakers around, because speaker adjustment. I'm not a audiophile freak. However, speaker adjustment can really make a difference. And if you have the room, depending on your speakers, if you have floor speakers, bring them out away from the back wall. For most speakers, you want to get the depth on that. And don't put your back chair all the way against the wall. Of course, most of us can't do that. We don't have the room. But this is a good record to do that for, to use for really just checking the balance there and everything. Anyway, thanks Elliot for suggesting this. This is really quick. This is kind of like a fast food version of acoustic music and bluegrass. Mazzy loves you. Thanks. Norman, Rare Guitars, Southern California.